us. I'm here in place of Max Parrish. My name is Carlos. I work with the Save Our Public Schools campaign. I'm a 13-year resident of East Boston. I was born in Columbia. We moved to East Boston when I was 5. And I grew up in East Boston and went to Boston Public Schools my entire life. In November, you're going to be faced with not only choosing a presidential candidate, as well as a whole host of candidates, but also four ballot questions, 5 if you live in Boston and Chelsea. Question 2 is going to be asking Massachusetts voters whether or not they think it's a good idea to lift the cap on Commonwealth charter schools across the state, or to keep the cap where it currently is. Commonwealth charter schools are not in-district charter schools. Commonwealth charter schools operate outside of traditional school districts. The Save Our Public Schools campaign is a grassroots coalition of students, parents, teachers, other community organizers and activists that are opposed to the expansion of charter schools in the state of Massachusetts. And there are several reasons for that. The first is last spring, I don't know if you heard, over 3,000 Boston Public School high schoolers and middle schoolers walked out of school in protest to massive budget cuts that they were facing in their schools. And through that protest, they were able to get back some funding, not all of it, but some funding. So already what we're seeing in our public schools, not just in Boston, but in other cities and towns, is that good public schools don't have enough resources. What we know will happen if we expand the number of charter schools in this state. We know this because we've already seen it happen, and it will continue to happen if we expand the number of charter schools, is draining of public funds from schools that already exist to charter schools. This is really concerning to us. If you go on the Department of Education website, there's a simple chart that will show you and break down about 230 communities across the state of Massachusetts that are losing some kind of funding to charter schools. Boston is losing about will lose $135 million of school funding to charter schools in 2017. And this is without the lifting of the cap. And we're concerned about that for obvious reasons. Now, you may have seen a recent Boston Globe editorial that's based on a Massachusetts Taxpayer Foundation report that negates the claim and says actually cities somehow aren't losing any funding to charter schools. Well, we don't agree with that, and that's not true, and obviously the numbers that we're seeing from the state and the numbers that we are getting from school committees across the state, 130 plus of which have already come out against this question, will tell you that they are losing funding to charter schools. So we're very concerned about that. We're also very concerned about the way that Commonwealth charter schools deal with accountability. So per this question, local communities would not have a say in what charter school and what kind of, and the number of charter schools that would open in their communities. The state approves charter schools, and there's no mechanism by which the community gets to say, hey, we don't want that charter school, or we don't want that kind of charter school. And that's obviously very concerning to us as people from public schools, where there are several mechanisms of engaging school districts around what's going on in our schools, what's wrong, what can be better. And the last thing that we're seeing, regrettably, is none of our schools are perfect, and we have a lot of work to do to fix our schools. I have a younger brother who goes to the Boston Community Leadership Academy. It's a high school in Hyde Park. He loves the school. He's a sophomore there, and obviously it's not without its problems. But one of the things that we are seeing in charter schools compared to their traditional school counterparts, based on data, is that there are way more expulsions and suspensions as a way to deal with students. And we know that that is not a fix for the problems that students are facing. We recently were able to put some measures out through the state legislature that encourages districts and supports them in implementing alternatives to suspensions and expulsions. All school districts have had to abide by that and are currently implementing that. We're having a very hard time tracking what Commonwealth charter schools are doing in that regard. And so those things combined, we want to make sure that this cap is not lifted. In fact, no city in the state has reached its cap yet. So we're very confused as to why this was even put on the ballot in 2016. Without lifting this cap, charter schools could expand in any city in the state. We want to make sure that this language is stopped. It's too broad. It opens up way too many questions without addressing a fundamental flaw in the funding mechanism. So I'll have flyers for folks that are interested on the no to argument of this question. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for the invitation. We really appreciate it. My name is Shane Dunn. I am a part of the Yes on 2 campaign. I'm the coalition's director, and our campaign is a coalition of multiple advocacy organizations, parents, community members across the state, including right here in Boston. I actually also live in East Boston. Prior to joining this campaign, I happened to work at a wonderful charter school, Excel Academy Charter School, which is based in East Boston and over in Chelsea. And this is my friend and former colleague, Krista Fink, and Krista will speak right at the end a little bit more about her experience, because I think what she can tell you about what it is day-to-day to work in a charter school and why she believes this is an important part of potential state policy issue, I think we'll give a little bit more data than what we've already been talking about. I'm here to tell you 3 things that I think it's important for this group and your residents and community members to know about. The first is remember that charter schools, Commonwealth charter schools, as well as other charter schools, are public schools. Public funding follows the child in Massachusetts. So when a child opts, or his or her family opts to send that child to a charter school, the money that would have been allocated to the district school follows the child. So it is the child's money, it is not a district's allotment of money. The other thing to remember based on that is public funding is going to public schools. And here in Massachusetts, we actually have a very robust reimbursement policy to ensure that district schools are not left behind when they lose students based on their choice to choose a charter school. The state actually has a 6-year reimbursement plan to provide up to 225% of that student's per pupil reimbursement back to the school district, which is extremely generous. It's more generous than anyone else in the country because the state, as we all know, heavily invests in education. So I want you all to remember again, charter schools are public schools. They just operate outside of some of the traditional systems that district schools have to. Excuse me. The second thing to mention is that parents across this state are demanding access to other schools, to charter schools. There are over 32,000 there are over 32,000 unique children on charter school waiting lists across the state. Almost half of those are right here in the city of Boston for the charter schools in this district. So there's heavy demand for this. This is not some group just trying to bring charter schools for the sake of bringing charter schools. It's because families see this as a choice. Families see this as another option because they're not satisfied for whatever reason with the option available to them in their neighborhood. In Boston, in Chelsea, in Holyoke, whatever it may be. So this is a parent demand question. And I firmly believe, and I think many people, hopefully in this room and around the Commonwealth, believe parent choice as an important opportunity when kids only have one shot at getting a great education, a great public education, hopefully. The final thing to mention is charter schools in Massachusetts are the best charter schools in the nation. We do things right here in Massachusetts. We're very proud as a state, as a Commonwealth, to have the best public schools broadly. We wear that on our wrists. We talk about it all the time. We tell our friends that visit that public schools are great here. But it's not great. They're not great for everyone. There's a lot of great schools out there, but they only serve a certain segment of students, usually the wealthy, maybe white folks only. But here in the cities and the urban cores of our state, there's a huge achievement gap. Kids of color, low-income families, low-income kids are learning at much lower rates than their peers in the suburbs, for example. And so I would argue that we actually don't have an equitable public education system, even though we do claim to be #1, and scores do show that. Charter schools within the #1 ranking have helped elevate that. Charter schools in Boston have been shown study after study in comparison to their peers around the country to be the best of the best. Many charter schools, including Excel Academy, where I had the pleasure of working, show over 2 to almost 3 years of academic gains in just one academic year compared to their district school counterparts. I think that's pretty impressive, and there's a lot of ways that charter schools do that. So I want everyone to remember we actually do have great charter schools here, and that's another reason why we are trying to lift this gap. So what does the ballot question say? Carl's alluded to some things here, but what are the provisions included on question 2 that I hope you will vote yes for? The first is to note that this will allow the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, which is the main authorizer of Commonwealth charter schools in Massachusetts, to approve up to 12 new charter schools or expansions across the state annually. Again, that is up to. The state has never approved more than 4 in 1 year. It's hard for me to imagine a situation where they would approve, especially in the early days after this capital, more than a handful of charter schools, because we have the best in the nation. We want to make sure accountability is still there, and quality over quantity is the name of the game here in Massachusetts. Second, public charter schools, the preference, if there's a lot of charter school demand, will be given the lowest performing 25% of districts in the state. So again, we're not trying to tell public school districts that have strong public schools, you need a charter school. That is up to the community to make a decision. These will go to those in-demand regions, including right here in Boston, because families are on the waiting list trying to get options to other schools. And other districts have not yet reached their cap. The next one is accountability. The state has done a great job holding charter schools accountable. What makes them so strong, that will continue. It probably might even be a little bit harder again. We don't want the floodgates open with poor charter schools. The state has shut down charter schools in the past, and it can do so again, and it will if it recognizes these schools are not serving the kids.
I just want to interrupt.
Yeah.
He only had 5 minutes.
Okay,
So I just
well
wanna
done.
make sure it's
Okay,
equal, so-
I'm actually going to end there because I do, there's one other thing, but it's, I think it's more important for you to hear from a charter school teacher, and then I'm open for questions. I'm sure Carlos is as well. So, this is
I will be
Kristen.
brief, but I just wanted to share a quick anecdote. So I went into teaching in a charter school knowing within the first 1 to 3 months I would love it or hate it. I would either believe in them or I would say, no, this is not working. So that is why I left my public school to actually to see what it was like to get another option and another perspective. And within the first couple of days, I knew that it was the right thing for our kids. The first year that we opened, we had a student who was reading at below a first grade reading level. He was a 5th grader. He came in. He had never been diagnosed with dyslexia. We found out a couple of months later that he was diagnosed, that he had dyslexia, and that's where his learning disabilities were coming from. He is now a 9th grader and a flourishing student and doing very, very well. I don't know that the district school that he came from would have provided him the support we could have at our school. I think that teachers work so hard at any school that he would have been at, but we have so many stories like that with so many students. He is a anxious kid for his family. He works really, really hard and is very joyful and excited. And I was happy to see him through 9th grade and excited he was able to make the decisions that he was with his reading level. So we have so many kids like that, but I think I really firmly believed in the option he was able to have because he was at our school. And his family was able to make that option for him. Living in Chelsea, he had 2 options. One was a district school that didn't do him personally so well. One was a Catholic school that his family had to pay for, which they didn't have the money for. So I think just having that option for him. Charter schools don't work for everyone. One of the reasons I would like to see the cap lifted is actually because we have a lot of no excuses charter schools in Massachusetts. So it would be wonderful to see other options explored for other students to see if we can reach a greater range of students who no excuses charter schools might not work for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone on the council have any questions prior to this?
Yeah, can you drill down a little bit on what a no excuses charter school is?
Yeah, so no excuses charter schools are frequently merits and demerits, higher structure and very formatted as students walk in the door. Parents see a clear difference. They usually use a merit and demerit system. A lot of our charter schools do, but they're considered no excuses charter schools.
In your experience, what's been the biggest difference? Why do you suppose they work? Is it the whole administration can really do what they want? Is essentially what they can do, the big difference is?
I think autonomy is a huge thing. I think we have been able to be flexible and see what works and what doesn't and change based on that. And we serve every kid because every kid is individual, so we'll make separate plans for certain kids. We have the capacity and we've brought in the knowledge to be able to do that from people who've come in from different districts, and we've utilized things that they've done in their schools.
This is Carlos.
Yes, Carlos.
What's the flaw in their presentation? What's the flaw in their argument?
Well, I think again, like Krista said, charter schools don't work for everyone, and that's concerning to me for a couple of reasons. One is, recently a City Lab, which researches urban issues across the country, zeroed in on major school districts and looked at school disciplinary policies in charter schools to figure out if A, charter schools are using harsher discipline than their district counterparts, and B, if that harsher discipline is actually working or beneficial. And what they found was that in our city, when they looked at 50 schools with the highest suspensions and expulsion rates, they found that 20 out of 50 schools were Commonwealth charter schools or low. The Boston area Commonwealth charter schools educate a pretty small percentage of our students. So for them to have occupied 40% of that list of schools that use the highest suspension and expulsion rates, I think was really concerning to us. I've been a high school student. I've worked with high school students. I worked with high school students to implement changes to the law to encourage schools and fund them to be able to use alternatives to suspension and expulsion. Suspensions and expulsions don't work to address issues. And I think one of the things that we're seeing at many Commonwealth charter schools is that suspensions and expulsions are used as a strategy to weed out kids that are harder to educate, to weed out kids that's going to take time and effort to wrap around and to support. And so what you're left with are students that are very easy to teach, students that will abide by behavior, which if you think that's okay, you can go ahead and think that's okay. I don't think that's okay, especially when public schools are being used to educate those children. So that's what we see as the major flaw with that.
Thank you.
May I ask a question? Don't we both parties agree that when schools compete for students, students do better? Don't we believe that perhaps a monopoly of public education in the country has caused us an enormous crisis when it comes to violence in inner cities, no discipline at schools? And I think that the option, as taxpayers, we find ourselves in positions where we have no options. Okay, I think that granting folks an option with something that remains a public school is a good choice. Here in our neighborhood, we have an innovation school, which is between a public school and a charter school. And we're a lot happier with the innovation school than we were with the public school. And I'm sure we would be a lot happier if it was a charter school. I've had the fortune to have my children throughout the Boston public school system. My son, who has Asperger's disability, went to a charter school in Roxbury, and the charter school was impeccably run. And I find that it was impeccably run. And the children achieved their goals, and there was a sense of community and a sense of ownership that I thought made education better. Nevertheless, I have a problem with Comcast, because it's the only person that provides me cable. If I had a choice, maybe I would have better cable. I think that most of us who pay taxes would like to have that choice. We'd like to have a choice in which we say, yes, I love my local public school, or no, I don't. I may like it, I may not like it. All right? I think that one of the flaws with education in America, I was raised in Argentina, I studied there, and we had choice. And government also was promoting and funding public education with sponsorships. In that sense, folks would have that choice. And I think that the choice is huge. And I think that if charter schools are wrong, public schools will win. If public schools are wrong, parents will make that choice. I think that the flaw of the system is that we don't have a choice. So as long as we maintain that standard, it's very difficult for a public school system to prove how great they are, and it's very difficult for a parent to make a choice when you have one.
Does anyone in the audience have any questions? All right, well, thank you both for coming.
Thanks, guys, very much.